IbramXKendi, 400 Souls, A Community History of African America, 1619 to 2019. And 400 Souls, A Community History of African America, 1619 to 2019, IbramXKendi unveils the compelling narrative of African American history and its integral role in shaping the United States. Covering 4 centuries of crucial events and social transformations, this book sheds light on the crucial intertwining of America's story with the practice of slavery, revealing the resilience and strength of African Americans in the face of often unimaginable adversity. As you journey through this enlightening summary, you'll explore the impact of key moments, such as the arrival of enslaved Angolans on the White Lion, and gain insight into the ongoing struggle for Black rights, from the Civil Rights era to the Black Lives Matter movement.
America's Entwined Origins. The tale of America's origins is inextricably linked to the lives of the Pilgrims arriving on the Mayflower in 1620 and the enslaved Africans, who landed just a year earlier in 1619. The Mayflower's passengers are celebrated as seekers of a better life, while the African captives aboard the White Lion faced the denial of basic human rights, forced into servitude. The practice of slavery became a defining factor in the development of the New World, creating a social and racial divide that has left an indelible mark on American society. The story of America is usually told from November 1620 when the Mayflower carrying English pilgrims arrived in Massachusetts. They sought a better life and eventually established a new society in line with their aspirations. However, just a year prior, the English ship White Lion anchored in Virginia, carrying 24 Angolan captives. These enslaved people, who we know little about, were sold as property, and their presence in the Americas reveals the deep connection between America's founding and the practice of slavery. This connection between the Pilgrims and the captives highlights a fundamental dichotomy in the American narrative. While the Pilgrims are celebrated for their triumphant journey towards a better life, the enslaved Angolans were property and had their human rights and dignity denied. Prior to the arrival of the White Lion, Africans were already living in the New World. The Spanish and Portuguese had been transporting slaves to the Caribbean as early as the 1520s. As colonization progressed, the transatlantic slave trade thrived, becoming the largest movement of people in world history, exploiting the knowledge and skills of West African communities such as Mandinka, Pearl, Wolof, and Hausa. As an institution, slavery's cruelty is hard to comprehend. Enslaved individuals were denied the right to autonomy and self-determination, and Europeans devised a dehumanizing ideology that constantly placed blackness inferior to whiteness. Over time, laws and social customs enforced this racial divide. The development of America would not have been possible without black labor and expertise. By 1649, over 300 black people resided in the British colony of Virginia, and their agricultural and domestic skills were indispensable to the colonists. By 1662, a Virginia law dictated that children of enslaved mothers would also become slaves themselves, solidifying slavery's place in the heart of American society, an essential historical fact that continues to shape the nation's evolution. Roots of slavery, greed and anti-black laws. A visit to Liverpool reveals the connection between England's wealth and the horrors of the Atlantic slave trade. As colonialism flourished, this wealth depended on the exploitation of indentured servants and slaves. After a multiracial uprising in Virginia led by Nathaniel Bacon, the ruling class enacted anti-black laws, fueling racial hierarchy and perpetuating oppression. One such law declared that baptism wouldn't grant freedom to enslaved people, displaying the twisted distortion of Christianity. The dark and rainy streets of Liverpool may seem worlds away from the tobacco fields of Virginia, but a closer look reveals a chilling connection. The facade of a historic building in Liverpool is adorned with African figures, while a nearby bank features engravings of shackled boys. This city is where England's insidious involvement in the Atlantic slave trade left its mark, involving the transportation of over 1.5 million enslaved Africans to the Americas. Born from unadulterated greed, slavery thrived as the ruling class pursued an endless stream of profit, regardless of the lives ruined in the process. Colonial America was a goldmine of natural resources and cash crops, with the labor of indentured servants and enslaved people being ruthlessly exploited. However, in 1676, tensions broke out when Nathaniel Bacon instigated a rebellion against the colonial governor, enlisting a multiracial force of working-class men. Though ultimately crushed, this united uprising struck fear into the hearts of the elite. In response, the Virginia Assembly enacted a series of stringent laws, such as the law for preventing Negro insurrection, to ensure that neither freedom nor equality could be attained by enslaved black people. These laws clearly outlined the emerging racial hierarchy, which pitted white working-class individuals against their former black comrades. This legislation expanded upon existing statutes that sought to set black people firmly at the bottom rung of society, including a law stating that Christian baptism didn't grant freedom to the enslaved. This distorted the core beliefs of Christianity, as black individuals were deliberately excluded from its protection, rendering their lives devoid of hope for emancipation. Strength in struggle and resistance. The history of enslaved Africans in America is marked by their unwavering pursuit of freedom, defying the oppressive racial caste system through various forms of resistance, escape, and the legacy of their cultural and musical contributions that have influenced American society up to the present day. In 1712, around 24 enslaved residents of New York City, primarily of Akansasante descent, sparked a rebellion to fight for their freedom. Despite the severe repression and execution of more than 70 enslaved individuals, this resistance would be echoed in a larger revolt in 1741. Throughout American history, the desire for freedom has withstood even the harshest oppression. By the 18th century, chattel slavery was deeply rooted across the Americas, with over 4,000 enslaved individuals brought to New York between 1700 and 1724. The colony's strict racial caste system limited the freedoms and rights of these individuals using a draconian slave code. In New York City, the meal market stands as a stark reminder of the dark side of history, where people were treated as commodities and bought or sold off Wall Street. Despite the cruelty and subjugation, black resistance only grew stronger. By 1724, more than 50 large insurrections occurred in cities and on slave ships, and Maroonage, escaping slavery, became increasingly prevalent. Escaped slaves in Virginia and the Carolinas formed hidden maroon communities, offering hope to those left behind. The significance of spirituality, art, and music in the lives of enslaved communities cannot be understated. Within the diversity of enslaved people, their rich and varied cultural expressions survived, shaping future artistic and musical landscapes. Today, the legacy of African Americans' creative output serves as a testament to their enduring spirit and pursuit of freedom against all odds. Debunking Enlightenment-Era racism. Despite the scientific racism prevalent during the Enlightenment, black accomplishments exposed the fallacy of racial hierarchy. Outstanding individuals like Lucy Terry Prince, Phyllis Wheatley, and Mumbet defied the false justifications for white supremacy and demonstrated the immense intellect and resilience of African Americans. Thomas Jefferson, the esteemed draftsman of the Declaration of Independence, paradoxically proclaimed all men as equals while believing that black people should be kept out of the democratic process due to the real distinctions which nature has made. Indeed, the contradictions of the Enlightenment era are apparent in the incongruous application of scientific principles to perpetuate racial inequality. Highly regarded scholars of the time fostered an unjust society based on the specious theory of black people's natural inferiority. Surprisingly, when one examines the brilliant achievements of African Americans during the Enlightenment, it becomes obvious that these racist assumptions held no basis in reality. In the mid-18th century, prominent thinkers employed faulty and prejudiced science to assert white supremacy. They maintained that black people possessed fewer innate qualities, such as reason and prudence, as a result of God and biology. This flawed logic was also invoked to legitimize the heinous mistreatment of Native Americans, leading to their subjugation and dispossession of their lands. Lucy Terry Prince exemplifies the extraordinary potential of African Americans despite oppressive circumstances. Kidnapped from Africa and enslaved around 1730, she was later granted her freedom by her husband, Abijah Prince. As an acclaimed orator, poet, and musician, she gained admiration in her adoptive Vermont community, and even utilized her exceptional rhetorical abilities to win cases before the state Supreme Court, an incredible achievement given the discriminatory legal system. Another shining example is the poetry of Phyllis Wheatley, a lifelong slave. Her poignant and expressive verses continue to touch readers today. Her poems, such as To a Lady on Her Remarkable Preservation in a Hurricane in North Carolina and A Farewell to America, evoke the emotional turmoil of life bound by servitude. In 1780, a woman known solely as Mumbet astutely harnessed Enlightenment ideals to dismantle the incompatible notions of liberty and slavery. Alongside a lawyer, she sued for her freedom based on the newly established Constitution of Massachusetts. The court could not refute her argument, leading to Mumbet's victory and the demise of slavery in the state. Entangled Roots, America and Slavery. The first president of the United States, George Washington, was elected by a small group of white male property owners over the age of 21. Like 12 other presidents before the Civil War, Washington was a slave owner. The American Constitution, despite not mentioning slavery explicitly, protected this revolting practice under the pretense of safeguarding property rights. While France and Haiti took steps to curtail and ban slavery during their respective revolutions, early American government fortified it, illustrated by the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793. This law enabled the recapture of escaped enslaved individuals while making it illegal to offer them aid. As America expanded, so did slavery. Prestigious forms of labor in the North and South relied on the forced work of enslaved people, including the labor to build famed universities such as Georgetown College and Rutgers University. Meanwhile, enslaved black communities fought to preserve their humanity, culture, and diverse expression of intimacy, defying the oppressive system imposed upon them. Black Voices Igniting Change. Freedom's Journal, the first black-owned newspaper in New York, marked the beginning of a movement for African Americans. As opposition to slavery grew, the paper inspired others like it, and became a platform for black thinkers to consider possible futures. The National Negro Conventions became a cornerstone for discussing not only abolition, but also racial separatism and mass emigration. Key figures such as Maria Stewart contributed groundbreaking ideas on race and intersectionality, while countless others navigated their lives in an unjust society. Born from the desire to plead our own cause, Freedom's Journal, New York's first black-owned newspaper, emerged in 1827 as the powerful voice of black people and their causes. Founding editors and abolitionists John Russwurm and Samuel Cornish used the platform to relay news, dismantle racist ideologies, and amplify calls for abolition. At its peak, the influential paper reached readers in 11 states, Haiti, and Europe, sparking the inception of similar publications. More than just a newspaper, Freedom's Journal set the stage for a movement centered around principled leadership, critical thinking, and inspiring organization. These elements fueled the rise of America's black identity and led to the exploration of potential future prospects as opposition to slavery intensified. During the years leading up to the Civil War, public discourse focused on slavery, emancipation, and black identity. As rebellion against slavery gained momentum, both enslaved and free black people, as well as progressive whites, demanded change in the North and South. This movement culminated in the National Negro Conventions, where prominent black leaders, clergy, and business people gathered to discuss contemporary political issues. Organized by influential black publications like Freedom's Journal and The Liberator, these conventions facilitated debates on various courses of action, from abolition to racial separatism to mass emigration to Western Africa. Attendees forged connections, creating a network that transcended geographic and social boundaries. Maria Stewart, a prominent member of this network, deftly tackled the multifaceted challenges faced by black women through her essays and public lectures. Her 1831 pamphlet, Religion and the Pure Principles of Morality, the sure foundation on which we must build, confronted racism while also addressing the sexism within the black community. In doing so, she laid the foundation for later discussions on race and intersectionality. As the movement continued to gain traction, countless individuals navigated America's racial landscape in unique ways. Some chose to pass for white using disguises or relying on a lighter complexion, others, however, embraced their black identity regardless of the ensuing difficulties. In every instance, courage and determination shone as individuals charted their course through an unjust society. Beyond emancipation's battles. Although President Lincoln initially hesitated to enlist black troops during the Civil War, he ultimately allowed them to fight in segregated battalions. Their victories significantly contributed to the Union's triumph, and many black soldiers transitioned into politics after the war. However, the nascent political influence of African Americans was met with widespread white backlash, including the violent suppression of voting rights and the rise of organized hate groups. Emancipation and the Civil War had not yet quenched the flames of racism and discrimination, which would continue to plague the nation for many years to come. At the start of the American Civil War, President Lincoln did not favor the inclusion of black soldiers in the Union Army. However, his stance changed in 1863 with the Emancipation Proclamation, which not only liberated enslaved individuals but also permitted black men to join the military. By the end of the war, approximately 200,000 black soldiers had fought for the Union Army, playing a crucial role in the victories of several major battles. Post-war, these soldiers contributed to the burgeoning political scene as some of America's first black politicians. Despite the 14th and 15th Amendments guaranteeing citizenship and voting rights for all men, regardless of race, the struggle for equality was far from over. As famed abolitionist Frederick Douglass observed, abolishing slavery was only the beginning of a much more significant movement for social change. The rise of black political participation was met with fierce resistance from white supremacists. Organized hate groups like the White League, White Knights, and the Ku Klux Klan used terror to suppress the black communities, assassinating politicians and threatening those who sought to vote. These groups successfully overthrew progressive governments and denied black citizens the right to hold political office. To justify their violence, such groups relied on insidious and false narratives about African Americans, like the idea that emancipation had emboldened the worst aspects of their character or that black men posed a sexual threat to white women. These hateful stereotypes gave rise to a horrifying epidemic of lynchings that persisted for over a century. The extent of this brutal violence prompted journalist Ida B. Wells Barnett to take a stand. In 1892, she published Southern Horrors, a meticulously researched work that debunked anti-black tropes and exposed the underlying motivations behind lynching. Wells Barnett called for black communities to defend themselves and mobilize for economic power, planting the seeds for the foundation of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. The fight for freedom and equality, though slow and arduous, would continue to gain momentum in the decades to come. The Great Migration's impact. On a sweltering summer day in 1919, 17-year-old Eugene Williams' tragic death in Lake Michigan ignited existing racial tensions, marking the beginning of the Red Summer. This intense period of violence exposed the harsh reality that segregation and racial hostilities were not limited to the American South. In a bid to escape these oppressive conditions, millions of black individuals moved north, altering the geography of black culture in the process. This massive movement, known as the Great Migration, saw millions leaving the fields of the South for industrial cities like Chicago, New York City, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia. Southern economies, however, depended on cheap labor provided by these black communities, and efforts were made to discourage and prevent the exodus. Despite experiencing its own share of racist policies and disparities in the North, the growing black population thrived culturally. Harlem became the center of a vibrant artistic and intellectual movement that left a lasting imprint on American culture, a testament to the resilience and creativity of the black community, even under oppressive circumstances. Combahee River Collective's impact. In the 1970s, the civil rights movement encountered a deadlock despite significant accomplishments such as the 1965 Voting Rights Act and the end of legal segregation. The Combahee River Collective, a group of diverse black women, emerged in 1974 with the objective of addressing contemporary issues affecting black women. Named after the river where Harriet Tubman led successful raids, they held radical study groups, educational retreats, and protests. They also made notable progress in various local causes such as helping 2 local black women avoid unjust criminal charges and challenging the conviction of Dr. Kenneth Edelin, a black doctor, for providing legal abortions. However, their most significant contribution is the 1977 Combahee River Collective Statement, a call for intersectional analysis and action that still resonates today. Unfinished struggle for equality. Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans in 2005, uncovering the U.S. government's negligence in failing to provide adequate aid to the predominantly black city. The incident exposed the deep-rooted issue of racial inequality in America. Over 400 years, black Americans have experienced systemic barriers to their growth, working tirelessly to diminish these injustices. Still, heavy disparities remain, from the war on drugs' impact on black communities to the targeted violence towards black individuals, illustrated by Trayvon Martin's tragic story. Today, Black Lives Matter fights for progress, making the names of victims of racial violence household discussion points, despite pushback from powerful detractors. New Orleans was left in ruin after Hurricane Katrina ravaged neighborhoods and left residents in desperate need of help. But the U.S. government neglected to provide support for this mostly black city, laying bare the racial inequality that plagues the nation. Despite a 400-year struggle against racism, the battle for true equality continues even today. Black Americans have experienced hostility and obstacles to their growth within the United States since its inception. While determined efforts from previous generations have diminished some of the prejudices and injustices, a great deal of work is still required. As these efforts persist into the 21st century, a new wave of activists is taking up the mantle of change. Unfortunately, recent years have seen new hurdles arise. The 1980s brought Ronald Reagan's discriminatory war on drugs, which disproportionately targeted people of color and devastated black neighborhoods. Later, in 1994, Bill Clinton signed the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, which contributed to the problem by excessively funding police departments and supporting harsh sentences. Consequently, the U.S. prison system has engulfed vast numbers of black Americans. Playing into this narrative, black individuals continue to face state-sponsored violence. The death of Trayvon Martin, a teenager fatally shot while walking home in 2012, spurred Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi to establish the Black Lives Matter (BLM) group. By evolving into a global movement, BLM demands recognition and protection for all black lives. Due to the efforts of BLM organizers and supporters, the names of those who have tragically lost their lives to racist and oppressive policing, such as Michael Brown, Renisha McBride, and Sandra Bland, have become widely recognized. While bittersweet, the sorrow of their losses drives the BLM movement forward. Despite criticism and resistance from those in power, BLM and similar collectives have proven that working together can yield success in the ongoing struggle for racial justice and equality.
As we come to the conclusion of this powerful summary, it's clear that the history of African Americans has been a vital force in shaping the United States as we know it. From the arrival of the first enslaved Angolans to the fight for civil rights and beyond, the narrative of African America's 400-year-long journey reveals a landscape filled with hope, despair, and determination. Throughout the book, we've seen the immense struggle, resistance, and accomplishments of countless African Americans who have faced oppression, racism, and discrimination. Today, movements like Black Lives Matter carry forward their legacy, continuing the 400-year struggle for genuine equality, justice, and human dignity.